You know, writer's block is a pretty common term. A lot of people know it and a lot of people understand what it is, but I don't think there's a defined term for what writer's block looks like when you're a dungeon master. And don't get me wrong, I understand why that's a little bit of a weird term because you're not the only writer at the table. There are all the players there and they're also creating the story, so getting writer's block is kind of like saying that you don't know where to railroad your players, at least in my mind. But I don't think that's the whole story. I think it is very important to know that it is possible for you to be able to feel like you're running out of creative juices on how to keep a game interesting. And I think it's also important for you to recognize that every single dungeon master hits a rut. There are sometimes you run a game that's just a slog. It doesn't feel interesting, it didn't feel that fun, it felt like it was kind of hard to get through, and nothing interesting has happened in the story for a little while. It happens. It happens to every single DM no matter who you are. You cannot be perfect. I distinctly remember watching episodes of Dimension 20 and Critical Role where that happened. The best DMs get stuck in a rut. It is impossible to avoid. With that being said, what do you do when you're stuck in that rut? How do you get out of it? Where do you get your inspiration from? Well, welcome to the topic of today's video. I want to talk about what happens when you get in a rut and how you can get out of that and continue to run the best game possible. So let's talk about it. In a lot of my videos, usually what I do is just kind of talk about my thoughts on things and just generally lay out what I feel about it. For this video, I actually genuinely have some pretty practical steps on how to be able to move out of a rut, as I've gotten into one many times while running my games. I actually specifically go through a list of steps that I've created for myself in order to be able to get myself out of it, and I'm going to provide that to you guys in the hopes that maybe it can help you whenever you experience this situation. And the first step that I always do is I just take a break. I don't look at my game. Usually, whenever I finish a game and I feel like it was a slog and I didn't do very well, I just take 2 or 3 days of not thinking about it. It's not helpful for me to constantly think about the fact that I didn't think I ran a very good game. And don't get me wrong, eventually I do go back to it and I do think about it because I think it's important to be able to look at a game and know what you did wrong so that you can learn from it and improve. That's how we, as humans, get better at things. But it's not helpful to do that if all I can do is focus on what I did wrong, not on what I could improve. And so a lot of times, I think the best thing you can do when you feel you are in a rut and not running a good game, just take a break from D&D for a few days. Don't think about it, don't work, just recuperate and be able to figure out exactly where you want to go once you've finished resting. I've said it before and I'll say it again, humans are not infinite. We are finite creatures and our energy is finite. You have to take time to take care of yourself in order to be able to improve on these things. Now, while I'm doing that and taking that break, there's something else I do, and it's something that's very important to me. I ingest media that I like. Books, movies, music, anything that inspires me or I really genuinely enjoy, I go ingest that. And the reason for this, I'm sure for most creative types, is pretty obvious. How many times do we as D&D players watch a movie, read a comic, listen to music, and we just can't help but relate it to our game in one way or another? Oh, did we see somebody super cool in a movie do something super awesome? Well, inevitably we're going to think about what that looks like in D&D and whether it relates to our party at all. Is there a music piece that particularly inspires you and feels just epic? Well, naturally you're going to think about that and backdrop to something else happening in the campaign. Let's be honest, we as D&D players, we begin to focus so much on our campaigns and it kind of infects the rest of our lives. It's something we think about no matter what's going on. I guess it's just a reality of the people who play these types of games. We love it so much that we just can't help but think about it. And so when I go and I revisit these pieces of media that really mean a lot to me and inspire me, it just helps me remember what I enjoy in our campaign and the type of things I enjoy in a story, and a lot of times they'll inspire me to move forward with something new. Something happened in a movie that I really liked. Okay, that reminds me of this piece that I really liked from our campaign. Maybe I can work with that. Or there's a piece of music that just really inspires an epic moment and gives me the inspiration I need to continue writing out my notes for the next session. Truthfully, this is probably the most effective thing that I do, and if it works, it works. But if it doesn't, that's when I begin to move on to the next steps in my plan in order to be able to get myself out of a rut. The second step is to watch other D&D campaigns. Critical Role, Dimension 20, just roll with it. I mean, there are a lot of good D&D podcasts out there, and you guys have provided a multitude of ones that I'm still trying to catch up on. But I know I cannot be the only one where when I watch somebody else play D&D, I get super excited about all these ideas of things that they're doing and oh wow, what if I did it but in this way? Honestly, that's one of the other things that really gets me out of a rut because it's just so inspiring to see other people have fun playing D&D and remind me why it is that I enjoy playing it, and also give me ideas of things that I could do. And it's funny, I watch these amazing DMs run their games and I think, wow, I would have done this differently, which is kind of crazy because they're really good, and for me to think that I could do it better is a little arrogant, but it really inspires me to want to run another session to prove myself. But if those two steps fail, I fall to my final step, and this is the one that has never failed to get me out of a rut when I really, really needed it, but it's been hard. And that's to look at my player characters. Look at the people around the table and the characters they're playing, and think, what is something that I have not touched on recently? What is a story beat that has not been revisited? Who is a character who hasn't been in the spotlight as of late? And when I look at that and start to think from that point of view, that's when I really start to make progress in getting out of a rut. Because if I have nothing else, if I have no inspiration, I at least know what matters to my players, and I can start moving in that direction as opposed to just sitting here not knowing what the heck I'm going to do. I have a general rule in my campaign. Nothing should go more than 3 sessions without something important happening for one of the characters. And what that means is I take a look at my player characters, and if one of them hasn't had anything important happen to them, whether an event that was directly focused on them or something from their backstory or a hint of where they're trying to go, I make sure to try and put that in, at least once every 3 sessions. And do I manage to do this every time? No. But I really try to, because I think it's very important that each player knows that the DM cares about where their story is going. And if I know that the player cares about where their story is going, and I care about where it is, that's what starts to get me excited and begins to get me out of that rut. Truthfully, I think the best thing that can happen is to remind the players that their characters matter, their backstory matters, the story that they've created matters, and there are consequences and rewards, and it just lets them know that the world around them is breathing and living and begins to get them excited. And as long as my players are excited, I begin to get excited because I know that they're enjoying the game that we're creating together, and there is nothing that could possibly be better for me than that. To know that everybody's excited for the next session is what gets me going out of my usual ruts that appear. And hopefully that's something that can help you guys out, but I think it's very important to just be realistic with yourself. Understand what gets you inspired and put that in front of you so that you can be inspired by it. And I've seen some DMs say that they don't want to copy other pieces of media. Here's the fact, there's not a single original idea under the sun. Every story, every movie, every book, every song is just a remix of something else. The fact of the matter is, and this is something some people don't seem to know, humans aren't actually capable of creating original ideas. The only thing we can do is build off of things that we have already learned. And to be honest with you, the best stories are the ones that understand where they came from, understand all the things that are inspiring them, and then create a twist out of it. Don't forget that every amazing fantasy series you've seen has probably been inspired by Lord of the Rings. Game of Thrones wouldn't have existed if Lord of the Rings hadn't, but everybody treats that as an amazing story, save for the last season, of course. And Lord of the Rings wouldn't have been there if there hadn't been other stories to inspire it beforehand, like children's fairy tales. So the simple fact of the matter is there's nothing original. It's about your specific twists, the things that only you can do to add to that story. So yeah, find the things that inspired you and look at those, because that will help you get out of a creative rut and feel inspired to continue to creating more for your players. And the more inspired you are, the more inspired your players are. And the more inspired your players are, the more inspired you are, so on, so on, so on. It is collaborative storytelling, and never forget that. So go out and run an awesome game, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget to play your role. Thank ya. Come again.